Hello, Adam's Blessed. Thank you for coming to hear Adam's Holy Word. This week's sermon is all about the T-Series of power armor, but with some caveats. I won't cover T51 specifically because I did an entire video on just that model, because it has the most information and lore of any other suit of power armor. So this is covering the T-Series power armors that are not T51, starting at the earliest games and mentions, and building on that with each successive game installment. The point is not only to go over the lore and dry details, but to see if and how that has changed over time, to offer clearly stated speculation to plug any holes the fanbase has identified in the lore, and lastly, to give my personal opinions about the different armors. Like always, my long-form videos have a comment highlight at the end, where I react to comments from my last two videos. And if you would like to chat about Fallout anything with me, join my Discord. So, turn up the rads, and get dressed in plaid while we go through the T-Series armors of Fallout. Ugh, that was bad. Despite what many may think, the story of T-45 does not start with Fallout 3. Rather, T-45 goes all the way back to Black Isle's planned Fallout 3, known as Van Buren at the time. It is shown in the Van Buren demo, the only glimpse we ever got into how the game would look and play. One NPC would be shown wearing T-45 and assist the player in getting to a vault shortly after the onset of the Great War. This NPC, known as Armstrong, had a few lines referencing the armor, mentioning that he had dozens of operational use hours while serving in Operation Anchorage, as well as stating that T-45D used small energy cells to power the armor, and apparently burned through them pretty quickly. This information contradicts the item description in the demo, which stated that it had a built-in fusion generator, similar to the T-51B. It also stated that the T-45 was derived from T-51 prototypes, meaning that it predates the T-51, but was apparently serviceable enough to be used in combat operations in Anchorage. The last most interesting detail is that the armor looks exactly like T-51, or at least how T-51 would have looked in Van Buren, since the art style has been slightly altered. Josh Sawyer was asked about this design, since it apparently looks just like T-51, and he clarified that it was just a placeholder design and they had intended on creating a unique T-45 model. But, according to him, it would have only been seen in the game's tutorial, which was to take place before the Great War, probably similar to the setting in the demo. This has interesting implications for the armor that I will discuss when we examine the armor as shown in Fallout 3. Our first true look at T-45 power armor came with the introduction of Fallout 3. The reveal trailer prominently shows the new power armor design up close and personal. Before we evaluate the design though, let's sum up T-45 related lore and see what information was added at this point in the series. The Fallout Bible, and I feel compelled to say this whenever I bring it up, it is not considered canon, but it was considered authoritative at the time of its release, so it is worth mentioning. It mentions a number of prototype armors that were being developed for use against the Chinese in Alaska. The Bible says in 2067 the first workable prototype was deployed in Alaska, and was considered a success. T-51 power armor would not be deployed until 9 years later in 2076. Van Buren would confirm that T-45 was either one of these prototypes or an evolved version of a prototype, making this the oldest officially deployed version of power armor known yet. Since Van Buren was never finished and the Bible is not canon, what do we learn of T-45 in Fallout 3? Nothing in Fallout 3 confirmed the Bible or Van Buren, but the naming convention of T-45 would imply that it came before T-51. T-51B power armor is seen in the Operation Anchorage DLC, and is the only power armor that is shown, and although T-51 would have been the shiny new toy of the fight in Alaska, it is interesting that some old T-45s aren't seen kicking around or being repaired or something. Fallout 3 added a new armor set called the Recon Armor that is pretty strange to look at until you find out that it is meant to be worn under power armor. Wires run along the length of the armor, and several circular plug-like components are found all over, likely functioning as interface points for the power armor shell. An inner suit is actually a really great idea, providing a layer of insulation and cushion between the hard armor and the squishy human inside. Lastly, there is a terminal entry in the Museum of Technology, where the museum researchers were hoping to get a hold of some, quote, original T-45D power armor, likely indicating they would have received one of the first produced units. Although the Brotherhood of Steel in Fallout and Fallout 2 use T-51B exclusively, none of the East Coast Brotherhood under Lion's command wear T-51. For some reason, they all wear T-45. Why would Lions drop all the original T-51 in favor of T-45? Where did they even find all this T-45? These are questions that are unfortunately left unanswered up to now, and we have to do our best to come up with reasonable explanations. But let's first talk about the stats and unique T-45 variants. The game only presents us with T-45D. Where models A, B, or C went, who knows, but it's mighty convenient that there's only one model kicking around. T-45 is the weakest power armor variant in the entirety of Fallout 3. It sits just behind the Advanced Power Armor Mark II, that I always refer to as Black Devil Power Armor, in order to not mix it up with the Advanced Power Armor Mark II from the first Fallouts. Although the Brotherhood on multiple occasions referred to the Black Devil Power Armor as being much more advanced and far more protective, with some Brotherhood members remarking that the armor is so advanced not even standard rounds could penetrate it, you could be forgiven for thinking that the Black Devil Power Armor is much better than standard T-45. But that is just not the case. T-45 has the same damage resistance, 200 less HP, a smidge less radiation resistance, and +2 to strength with -2 to agility, compared to +1 strength and -1 agility for Black Devil Power Armor. There is one thing the Black Devil armor does worse than the T-45, and that is a -1 charisma penalty. Looking at those stats, sorry, but I don't see what everyone is freaking out about. Black Devil armor is better, but only just. There is a unique variant of T-45 that is the suit only, no helmet, and my personal favorite power armor in Fallout 3, the one and only prototype medic power armor. Stat-wise, it is identical to the T-45, except that it does not increase strength by 1. However, it has 15 points of radiation resistance, auto-injects Med-X to the player when HP gets low, and best of all, whispers sweet nothings into your ear. Yeah, no, it yells at you drill sergeant style using a Mr. Gutsy voice.
Be a soldier, not a civvy. Have some juice and suck it up.
When your health drops below 33%, the suit will draw on your Med-X supply and juice you, but only at a rate of once every 2.5 in-game hours. Best of all, getting Med-X delivered this way does not carry the risk of addiction, so it is hands down the best way to take advantage of the benefits of Med-X. The only physical difference between the Medic power armor and the base T-45 armor is the presence of US military roundels on the pauldrons, where most Brotherhood suits have the Brotherhood insignia. The suit will also alert the user to enemies that are close and give nice pep talks like the following.
Pansy, take a shot of vitamin M and keep fighting.
Luckily, the armor comes with a manual that explains the purpose and functionality in case that wasn't made clear by everything I just told you. This prototype only injects Med-X, although the creators of the armor intended for it to also inject stim packs and other chems. The inclusion of a voice was to make the armor dummy-proof, since the armor would constantly let the user know what was going on. The armor was meant to be expanded to communicate data back to field officers, and even contained a self-destruction protocol that was meant to kill the user should the soldier try and desert while wearing the armor. Yikes. The armor can only be found on a dead Brotherhood of Steel initiate in the Olney Sewers, which is the Deathclaw capital of the Wasteland for whatever reason. Digging a bit into the game files, the name of the object makes it clear that it was originally intended to be the end reward for completing the Gotta Shoot 'em in the Head quest, where either the Lone Wanderer or Mr. Crowley, the ghoul, retrieves the so-called treasure, which ends up being a suit of T-51B. I do think a useful prototype like this would make more sense being guarded behind a stasis field at Fort Constantine instead of the T-51, even if statistically it is inferior to T-51. A variant simply called Brotherhood Power Armor is exactly the same as base T-45, except it has the Brotherhood of Steel logo on the pauldrons. A unique version of this armor is Lion's Pride Power Armor, which again is identical to the base T45 Power Armor. Lion's Pride Power Armor can only be acquired by looting the armor off of dead members of the Lion's Pride, or reverse pickpocketing the members. It is differentiated only by the Lion's Pride insignia on the pauldrons in the place of the Brotherhood symbol. The Brotherhood Outcasts are an intriguing offshoot of Lion's Brotherhood, and are some of the biggest jerks you'll run into while exploring the wastes. Their T45 power armor is identical stat-wise, with the only difference being that it sports a different color scheme, although I couldn't find any reason for the new paint scheme, other than obviously being very different from the main Brotherhood group. There is a unique variant of Outcast armor called Lyndon's Outcast Power Armor, who is a former member of the Outcasts. Stat-wise, it only increases strength by 1 and loses 1 agility, compared to plus and minus 2 from the normal Outcast armor, but it gets a plus 5 buff to big guns, which is a nice little bonus. Lyndon left the Brotherhood of Steel when the Outcasts broke away, apparently believing that they were not fulfilling their obligations as sworn members of the Brotherhood. On a mission to recover technology, Lyndon and his group were attacked by Deathclaws, which resulted in his whole squad dying and him being gravely wounded. He was found by a trader caravan and taken to Oasis, where the Tree Minders nursed him back to health. Lyndon felt he owed the Tree Minders a great debt, and therefore decided to stay, protecting them but eschewing his armor, preferring the Tree Minder garb instead. He believes that Harold should stay alive, and the Wasteland should benefit from the Herald's abilities to grow lush vegetation, and will reward the player with his old armor if the player applies Laurel's Liniment that accelerates Harold's growth. This armor is interesting because wearing it will not make the Outcasts treat you any different. In addition, Protector Kasdan will not confiscate the armor if the player is wearing it while talking to him. Kasdan will confiscate any other Outcast armor though, just not this one, and I can't think of a good reason why outside of gameplay purposes. The last variant of the T45 found in Fallout 3 is the Tribal Power Armor, and it is found only in the Pit DLC. In order to explain Tribal Power Armor, we need to look at Asher's Power Armor first. Asher is the ex-Brotherhood leader of the Raiders in the Pit, with a very stylized and unique looking power armor. The armor has seen heavy abuse, missing the left arm armor and pauldron entirely. In what is likely an aesthetic choice rather than anything useful, a Brahmin skull has been attached in place of the left pauldron. The right leg has also broken to a point where it requires large leather straps to keep in place. And there appear to be pieces of metal bolted to the armor, likely as some sort of patch to the underlying plates. The armor is accented with yellow paint in stripes and symbols. Part of someone's skull is prominently displayed over the codpiece, and the armor is very rusted and dirty. Despite Asher's armor missing entire sections of protective plates and being held together with leather straps in some places, it has the same damage resistance as the base T45, as well as the same health. It also gets +1 to strength, +1 to charisma, +1 to luck, and -1 to agility while having the same normal 10 radiation resistance. Asher's armor is arguably the best of all variants. The only disappointing part is that it does not come with a matching helmet. So if the tribal armor I mentioned before looks exactly like Asher's armor, why did I talk about Asher's armor first? That is because the tribal armor was purpose-built to look exactly like Asher's armor by the armor designers. Asher's influence among his followers is so immense that he is borderline deified, so it makes sense that effort would be put into perfectly emulating his armor. The tribal armor is the only suit of T45 that does not have 40 damage resistance, sitting instead at 35, while also weighing 5 pounds less. It increases strength by 1, luck by 1, adds 15 AP, and has +5 to melee weapons with only 1 - to agility. So depending on your build, this might be worth considering. Only one suit of tribal power armor is available, and can only be received after finding 100 steel ingots in the scrapyard and returning them to Everett, who will award the Lone Wanderer with what he calls the prize of his collection. Once again, I feel the need to point out that he has given a slave both really good weapons and now a good set of power armor. Is Everett trying to arm a slave rebellion? Because this is how you get a slave rebellion. I wonder if the tribal power armor used another set of Brotherhood T-45, or if it was just a random set of T-45 that was found in Pittsburgh and purpose-made to emulate Asher's armor. Additionally, I find the name Tribal Power Armor to be interesting because I never considered the Pit Raiders to be a tribe or even really tribalistic. Fallout, Fallout 2, and Fallout New Vegas all have self-described tribal groups, and Asher's Raiders don't fall into that kind of tribal classification. There's a cut variant of T-45 simply called Army Power Armor that is identical in every way to the base T-45, just with Army insignias on the pauldrons. T-45 has a nice design, and although it is distinct from T-51, there is a vague resemblance. The helmet has some of the same elements from the T-51, but there are some interesting additions to the suit. Some holes in the pauldrons look like they are meant to allow the armor to hang when being worked on, or maybe allow a power-armored individual to pull something heavy. On the back, there are some small tank-like parts with pipes running around the neck and down into the chest. I believe these correspond with the two nozzles under the protruding breastplate. Whatever is contained in these tanks is likely topped up through these nozzles, but as to what this substance might be, I think the likeliest explanation is some sort of coolant. The T-45 in Fallout 3 does not require any fuel source, and it is assumed that it uses a similar power source to T-51, which up to this point in the series was explained to have a micro-fusion pack. Many like myself have wondered why the East Coast Brotherhood seems to only use T-45, even though the Brotherhood is only seen to use T-51 in the first Fallouts. I don't have an answer, but given that Asher in the pit is sporting his altered T-45 armor, at the point the East Coast Brotherhood passed through the pit, they had at least some T-45s. Does this mean they had a mix of T-45s and T-51s, or were they sporting all T-45s their entire journey? Bethesda, give us some answers. Personally, I like the look of T-45, although I must acknowledge any bias I have towards Fallout 3, since it was my first Fallout game, and that menu screen still gives me feelings I have yet to fully come to grips with. Actually, I should bring that up with my therapist. The next outing we got in T-45 was in the sun-scorched desert of the Mojave, and once again, it is the most easily accessible and least capable of all the power armor variants. New Vegas doesn't add a lot of information to T-45 lore, but a conversation between the courier and Ricky, the not at all annoying dude that wants to travel with the Happy Trails Trading Company to New Canaan, reveals that T-Series eye slits are bulletproof. What New Vegas doesn't explicitly say though, they imply by the in-game presence of the armor. New Vegas officially confirmed the existence of the armor on the West Coast. T-45 wasn't going to be another regional item like many weapons seem to be. It can be found in a shocking number of areas, being found or sold by the Brotherhood, Hoover Dam, the Great Khan Armory, the Sink in Old World Blues, and even in the Lonesome Road DLC. For never being in Fallout or Fallout 2, it sure is very common in the Mojave. We also get the first confirmation of the Brotherhood having T-45, although all members of the Mojave chapter are seen to use the superior T-51. With a damage threshold of 22 and HP of 1000, it also increases strength by 2 and decreases agility by 2, offering 10% radiation resistance. This once again makes it the worst of all power armor variants. T-51 and Remnant power armor are just much more capable. That said, New Vegas does have some very interesting T-45 variants. The Brotherhood variant has the same exact stats as the base T-45, with the only difference again being the insignia on the pauldrons. It can be found in the Dead Wind Cavern on the body of a deceased Brotherhood member, or will actually be worn by some Brotherhood members if the courier convinces the Brotherhood to help the NCR at the battle for Hoover Dam. I guess the NCR wasn't worth risking their T-51. Another variant that can't actually be equipped without console commands, but is found in the Brotherhood bunker, is the Broken power armor. It is on a work table in one of the labs, and an NPC will tell the player that the armor is non-functional and needs to be fixed. The player cannot actually pick up the armor and test this though, unless it is equipped with console commands. True to their word, it has the same weight as a normal set of power armor, but has 0 damage threshold, 0 HP, but does retain the normal radiation resistance. One step up from non-functional power armor is the NCR Salvaged power armor, which is power armor that has had all the hydroelectric support systems stripped out. So the only thing moving this armor around is good old-fashioned muscle. It has slightly lower damage threshold than base level T45, but not all that much, sitting at 20 versus 22. All the other stats are the same except for the effects, which is a -2 penalty to agility and no other bonuses. The NCR recovered several sets of T45s from their battle with the Brotherhood, and salvaged power armor only shows up as T45, never T51, so sit and stew on that for a moment. By removing the servos, the NCR made the power armor easier to use? Let me rephrase that. With no electrical assistance, the suits no longer require training to use, and anyone with the muscle density of an Olympic powerlifter could hop in a set of salvaged power armor and reap the protective benefits. A pretty glaring problem in this whole plan, however, is that power armor has traditionally used its power source for more than just moving. Life support systems, up to and including climate control and urine recycling, has kept the wearer as battle ready as possible, and a giant hunk of metal out in the Mojave would get pretty freaking toasty. Since there are no electronics, however, EMP weapons no longer do extra damage. 'Cause, you know. And it can be seen worn by heavy troopers at places like Camp McCarran, Hoover Dam, or Camp Forlorn Hope, as well as the Long 15, where it is used by irradiated heavy troopers. It has markings clearly identifying it as NCR, with the two-headed bear and star, but very appropriately removes the large pauldrons since they are of questionable use and effectiveness, and would help shed a lot of weight. On the back there are some extra things, although their use eludes me. If you have any idea, leave it in the comments. If the player helps forge an alliance between the Brotherhood and the NCR will agree to hand all of their salvaged suits of armor back to the Brotherhood, and in turn, the Brotherhood will help patrol the areas around I-15 and Highway 95. The last variant of T-45 found in New Vegas was introduced in the Lonesome Road add-on, the Scorched Sierra Power Armor. This very unique set of armor is black, with green, red, and gold highlights, but most notable of all, has a taxidermied Yao Guai head on the left pauldron. This unique power armor is only slightly worse stat-wise than the T-51, having 1 less damage threshold and 400 less HP, but has some really great effects. It increases strength by 1, fire resistance by 25, and will regenerate HP at a rate of 2 HP per second while the armor is equipped. That is quite incredible. So how do you get this sweet piece of kit? At the end of the Lonesome Road add-on, you have one option of many, which is to launch a nuclear missile at the NCR. This will detonate somewhere along I-15, where an NCR commander, Colonel Royas, was stationed and at least partially nuked. He can be encountered if the player then travels to the Long 15 location, where he and a group of irradiated heavy troopers and ghouls will be waiting and pissed. This fight is hard as nails, and the reward is a sense of pride and accomplishment. Just kidding, it's the Scorched Sierra armor, and this highly modified armor delivers. That begs the question though, was Colonel Royas issued the armor before being nuked by the courier, or was it something he acquired after? Other than drastic aesthetic changes, it also has protection against fire, which might be symbolic of Royas surviving the detonation. The power armor has received substantial physical changes as well. The valve and tank-like objects on the back are replaced with a large square with green vents. So there has been some serious modification, although it is impossible to say if it's been pre or post-war. There was supposed to be a helmet that ended up getting cut from the game, and that is a crying shame because the whole thing is black with tinted green eye covers. Altogether, it actually makes for a fantastic looking helmet, and I was really disappointed to find out that it is not included in the game. There are no large changes or lore additions to the T-45 in New Vegas, other than confirming that the armor does exist on the West Coast, and in quite plentiful numbers. The Scorched Sierra Power Armor also seems to confirm that there are variants that are different on a mechanical level, and maybe this is not T-45D, but some other model. T-45 also still holds its spot as the lowest tier power armor available, just like in Fallout 3. A nice little fun detail, some Legion armor concept art shows a mishmash of existing armors, including the T-45, which you can see here is the entire left arm, including the pauldron. Fallout 4 changed so much when it comes to power armor that it is difficult to know where to even begin. Like all power armors that got a refresh, the armor is now bulkier and has minor changes like the turn valve being relocated lower on the back and the internal tanks mounted higher. There are an obscene amount of upgrades that can be applied to this armor like most others, and the armor itself can be leveled up as well. As the armor is leveled, it goes from T45A, which is the most basic model, all the way up to T45F. That is a nice touch, since we have only seen T45D up to this point, and although there are no mechanical differences between the different models, the A models will have a rusted exterior, whereas the other more advanced versions do not. That would imply that the armor plating gets upgraded to a kind of metal that doesn't rust as readily. Fallout 4's introduction of power armor frames also removed the need for recon armor that was previously used to help interface with T45 power armor, although the Brotherhood of Steel uniform has a somewhat similar look like a pilot suit. There are even some small circular objects all over that are not too far off from what can be seen on the old recon armor, but this uniform is far from required to successfully use all the power armor functions. Fallout 4 confirms a piece of lore that we have long suspected, and that was mentioned by the Fallout Bible and Van Buren, that it indeed was the first version of power armor ever employed on the battlefield. Since it is the first, it is also the least advanced pre-war model and is fairly easily found. Looking at how the armor stacks up against the competition, it is not actually the lowest of all power armor options. Raider power armor now takes the L, while the T-45 beats it out in energy resistance, HP, and a number of upgrade options. It does have the same damage resistance and radiation resistance as the Raider power armor. The T-45 lags behind T-51 power armor, losing out in every single category, just tying T-51 for radiation resistance. This is the same relationship that T-45 and T-51 had in other games, and T-45 being better than Raider power armor totally makes sense to me, since that Raider armor looks like any old chunk of metal was welded to the frame. Because of how modular things are in Fallout 4, there are no unique sets of T-45 armor. The closest we can come to it is a unique torso piece, the piezonucleic armor, but only if you do the associated side quest at Cambridge Polymer Labs between levels 1 and 13. I talked about this piece in my T-51 video because it is also available as a T-51 armor piece depending on your level, so I won't go into all the detail about it here. Suffice it to say that the name is meaningless scientific gobbledygook, say that 5 times fast, and the legendary effect is to increase action point refresh speed while being irradiated. The implicit lore we can gather from Fallout 4 related to T-45 is that it is widely available in the Commonwealth, similar to the Capital Wasteland to the south. Perhaps the East Coast had a higher prevalence of T-45 than the West Coast. And although there is also quite a bit of T-51, we can infer that military personnel were actively using T-45 domestically. T-45 can be found locked at old military checkpoints, in old military and industrial buildings, and one was being used by a soldier when the vertibird he was in crashed into the Museum of Freedom, not long after the events of the Great War. It could make sense that the military would use older and less potent T-45 power armor to try and keep the peace domestically and quell dissent, without sacrificing firepower for the fight against China. T-45 is also the only model of power armor that can accept the Minutemen paint scheme, because T-45 is the armor of the people. Enter the new kid on the T-Series block, T-60 power armor. Since this is the armor's first reveal, all the lore we know pertaining to the armor is given to us in Fallout 4. T-60 is to Fallout 4 as T-45 was to Fallout 3. That is, it became the face of the game, and that love extends into the gameplay as well. A loading screen in Fallout 4 states that the T-60 series of power armor saw extensive use by the United States Army after the Battle of Anchorage. T-60 was used domestically as well, which is seen early on in the pre-war introduction, where T-60 clad soldiers are blocking the way to the vault. The lack of T-60 in Alaska as seen in Operation Anchorage and spoken of in the games indicates that this was introduced later in the war effort against the Chinese. The naming convention of T60 coming after T51 would also seem to indicate this, but the numbers for military vehicles don't always follow the pattern of larger number was developed later. Similar to T45, as T60 is upgraded to more advanced models, it advances from T60A all the way up to F models, and is a substantial step above T51 power armor, putting it well ahead of the previously mentioned T45. The similarities to T45 don't stop there, but we will get back to that in just a bit. T60 power armor is easily found all over the Commonwealth, and is the only power armor that is seen in the pre-war segment, so the Commonwealth could be considered a hotspot for this armor type for a reason that is never explained, but I'm sure you guys could come up with something. T60 is most notable for being used exclusively by the Brotherhood of Steel, both the early recon groups that came to the Commonwealth, and the main force that arrives with the Prydwen is completely decked out in T60. This shows another huge change in the Brotherhood standard issue power armor, starting with exclusively T51 on the West Coast, to exclusively T45 in the Capital Wasteland, to exclusively T60 in the Commonwealth. The change from superior T51 to inferior T45 was a rather curious change, but it is more justifiable that the Brotherhood pushed to arm their forces with T60 because, at least according to Fallout 4, it is more powerful than both T45 and T51. The Brotherhood was able to procure enough T60 power armor to refit their forces in only 10 years, because there are 10 years between the events of Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. How is this possible? Since the Brotherhood has all but claimed the T60 as their own, the Brotherhood paint schemes are specific to this power armor, so if you want to join the Brotherhood and look the part, T60 will be your armor. The Brotherhood is not the only group that exclusively runs T60. The vastly superior Atom Cats are dedicated to the T60 and apply their own special Atom Cat paint that increases charisma and action point cost while adding some awesome hot rod flames. Damn, those guys are so cool. Once again, because there are no actual full legendary sets due to how things are modified and upgraded in Fallout 4, there are only unique legendary armor pieces. T60 is the only armor in Fallout 4 that can be built using all legendary armor pieces. Again, Fallout 4 just loves this armor, so that makes sense, I suppose. Starting with the helmet, the Visionary's T60C helmet increases action point refresh speed and has a small buff to physical and energy damage over the vanilla helmet. It is received from Lancer Captain Kells after completing the mission A Loose End, in favor of the Brotherhood of Steel. For a legendary torso, there are two options: the Tesla T60 torso or the Exemplar's T60C torso. The Tesla torso was introduced with the Automatron DLC and brings back the awesome Tesla technology that we saw in all previous Fallout games. It provides a bonus to damage dealt with energy weapons by 5%, but all other stats are identical. It is somewhat curious that it boosts damage rather than increases energy damage resistance, but a buff is a buff, I guess. It comes with an awesome electrified pack on the back, similar to the Tesla armor that is seen used by the Enclave in Fallout 3. This torso is won by defeating Ivy at the Fort Hagen hangar, the boss of the Rust Devils. The Exemplar's torso comes with a 10% reduction in AP cost in VATS and gets a small boost of 2 extra points to physical and energy resistance. It is awarded after completing the mission Duty or Dishonor by persuading Clark, who was stealing supplies to feed feral ghouls, to turn himself into the Brotherhood for his theft. The only unique arm armor comes bundled with the Tesla torso, having the same effect as the torso by boosting energy weapon damage, and is also won off of Ivy, the Rust Devil boss. A unique leg piece called Honor increases action point refresh speed, along with a small boost to base stats. It and the other right leg piece called Vengeance can be bought off of Proctor Tegan on the Prydwen once being promoted to Paladin. Vengeance has the Punisher legendary effect, which reflects 10% of enemy melee damage back to the attacker. All it takes is one glance at T60 to see the aesthetic connection to T45. The whole armor is subtly different in almost every way, but the T60 is very much an evolution of the T45 design. It is bigger than T45, but then again, every armor is bigger than T45, but the visual cues combined with the established lore of the armor entering military service after the Battle of Anchorage, plus its statistical superiority over T45 and T51, implies that the T60 is a continuation and evolution of T45. Bethesda provided a good amount of behind-the-scenes information related to T60, mostly in the Art of Fallout 4 book. Between the Art of Fallout 4 and interviews with Bethesda employees, we found out that reworking power armor to be a true exoskeleton was done just as Fallout 3 was finishing development. The first efforts started with altering T45, which went through several revisions until we got the armor that is T60, and it was different enough that Bethesda felt compelled to make it a new armor. Personally, I think T60 looks great. I liked T45, but T60 takes what was good with the T45 design and amplifies it. It looks big, powerful, and menacing, but it doesn't look like they are trying too hard to look as mean as possible, and I respect that. My personal Fallout collection is small, but a T60 lithograph is one of the things that when I saw it, I had to get it. Love it or hate it, Fallout 76 carries on the tale of the T45, T60, and even expands the T-Series family, so let's see how these armors have evolved. Let's start with T45, which is found easily enough in Appalachia, especially at low levels. The armor does not get any expanded lore in Fallout 76, and sits in roughly the same spot stat-wise when compared to the other armors. It is substantially better than Raider armor in physical, energy, and radiation resistance, and beats out the new Excavator armor in physical and energy resistance, although it loses out to radiation. It slots in behind the T51, which is a very solid step up, like in Fallout 4. In typical Fallout 76 fashion, the armor gets even more upgrades, and a truly obscene number of paint jobs. I couldn't find any legendaries or paint jobs that were unique to the T45. If you know of some, please let me know in the comments, because it kind of seems like the T45 is being forgotten, even though it was so iconic in Bethesda's very first Fallout game. In Fallout 76, the Brotherhood contingent that was sent to West Virginia to investigate the fate of the original Appalachian Brotherhood arrives in T51 power armor and uses that exclusively. This would seem to nullify the thought that Lion's Brotherhood from Fallout 3 may have started in T51 and switched to T45 since it may have been easier to repair and more plentiful. A substantial group of Brotherhood made the cross-country trek in their T51 and continue to use them with no problem. And that, coupled with New Vegas showing a good amount of T45 on the West Coast and in use by the Brotherhood, most likely means that when Lions was sent east, they started out in T45, but that's just speculation. T60 premieres in Fallout 76 exactly as it did in Fallout 4, with the expanded upgrades and paint jobs that are too numerous to go over here without watching all of your eyes collectively glaze over. A Fallout 76 loading screen confirms that the T60 is the most advanced suit of power armor to see extensive use, and was commonly found amongst military units around the time of the Great War. That more or less confirms what we knew before, but also tells us that it was considered a common sight just before the bombs fell. What is the most interesting, however, is that while Fallout 76 goes on to say that T60 was the most advanced power armor in active use before the Great War, T51 is now more capable than T60 in terms of overall protection. Comparing the armors both at level 50, T60 is noticeably weaker than T51 in physical damage resistance and far behind in energy resistance. T51 only lacks radiation resistance, where the T60 really puts it to shame. Obviously, we need to think of games in isolation when looking at their stats. Due to hundreds of factors, games are balanced differently, and the likeliest explanation is that the stats reflect Bethesda's attempt to balance the armors for their new game. Stated lore always takes precedence over in-game stats, but for us fans that enjoy the lore, it takes us out of it when what is said and what is shown don't line up. T60 does get unique paint jobs though, It is the only armor that can get the unique Brotherhood paint jobs, and the black with red highlights looks fantastic. Technically, you can also get the Atom Cap paint job from Fallout 4, but this can only be acquired by modding the game. In relation to T60, I left some hanging questions when going over the lore and information from Fallout 4, such as where the Brotherhood got so many suits of T60, or what is the actual background of the armor. This is speculation. I want to state that up front, but based on what we know, I think it is likely the Brotherhood produced many of the units of T60 that they wear for two main reasons. The first is that they were all sporting T45 just 10 years before the events of Fallout 4, which does not give them much time to refit all their forces if they are only scavenging old suits. The second reason is that they have proven to have impressive industrial capabilities, since it is stated that they made the Prydwen almost entirely from scratch, and therefore it is feasible that they could reverse engineer T60 power armor and reproduce it in an industrial capacity. We need to have some official confirmation from Bethesda, but in Fallout 76, the fact that T60 is the only power armor that can accept Brotherhood paint jobs might be a clue here. As to the development background of T60, we know the artists that designed the armor used T45 as a starting point, and I think it would naturally follow that T60 is a more advanced version of T45, using a similar platform but upgrading it until it is almost unrecognizable is not that uncommon. Just like the M4 Sherman the US used at the start of World War II, which had a host of variants at the end of the war, as it was upgraded and transformed to meet certain needs. It could also make quick manufacture easy, since rather than developing and building a new armor from the ground up, which takes a lot of time and resources, they could simply reuse a lot of the production process to build T60 that was already in place for T45. T51, on the other hand, has much different materials, and almost all of the components are completely different, and it would necessitate a totally different process. I like the inclusion of T60, and I think it makes more sense to have these kinds of generational evolutions of power armor models than just completely different kinds of power armor made out of whole cloth. But wait, there's more. The T-Series got a brand new entry in Fallout 76 to the shock of absolutely nobody. T65 power armor looks drastically different from any other T-Series armor and was used exclusively by the Secret Service, the group best known for protecting the President of the United States and less well known for investigating counterfeit money. T65 is the most powerful of all power armor variants, beating out everything in terms of physical and energy resistance, and being beat out a bit in radiation resistance by the Strangler Heart power armor. Because it is so powerful, no wearable suits are found just laying around, and the player must either side with the Raiders or the Settlers at the end of the Wastelanders add-on to unlock Gold Bullion, which is the only currency accepted by the NPC known as Regs in Vault 79. He will sell plans for the armor after the player completes the associated quest with Vault 79, which is purpose-built to protect the government's gold reserves, and subsequently protected by the Secret Service clad in T65. The T65 gets a lot of upgrades, and some paint jobs as well, and it also has a unique jetpack model. The T65 does look pretty cool, although I think the base paint scheme doesn't really do it justice, and some of the other paint jobs highlight its unique shapes and features. Although I tend to like darker colors on my power armor, the paint jobs like the Armor Ace paint give good contrast and definition to the armor. T65 doesn't appear to be an evolution of any existing power armor, and instead an original creation, somehow even bulkier than T60, and sporting an awesome mohawk, which is the one true reason I like the T65. When looking at the concept art of all these different options, I'm happy that we got the helmet model that we did. Although the super tall pauldrons of the 1st and 5th design are kind of cool, and would have been even cooler if they only popped up when engaged in combat. Hopefully we can get some more info on this power armor as the series progresses, because I'm sure we'll be seeing it again. There you have it, everything I could find related to T45, T60, and T65 power armor. Do you have anything to add that I might have missed? Which of these armors is your favorite and why? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you need a more personal connection with me, please come to the Discord, where I and like-minded people like to chat about Fallout, among other things. If Adam's word has brought you any light, you can repay him by contributing $1 or more to my Patreon. All donations go towards finding that radioactive tracer that was lost in Australia. I want to thank all my lovely patrons for making what I do possible. Adam will reward you for your sacrifice. Now to the comments on my Rifles of Fallout Remastered video from 2 weeks ago. Colonel Dave Autumn mentioned a more appropriate real-world inspiration for the automatic rifle in the Sierra Madre. It much more closely resembles the Colt Monitor, which was based on the BAR platform, but specifically made for law enforcement use in the early 20th century. Good eye there, Autumn. And this is even more appropriate since the automatic rifle was used exclusively by the Sierra Madre security, and it makes sense that Sinclair would opt for a rifle that was already being used by law enforcement. A few of you, like Zower3025, let me know that the handmade rifle is most likely a reference to the so-called Shovel AK-47 that was made using an AK kit, a barrel blank, and, of course, a shovel. This is a great catch, and certainly served as the inspiration for the homemade rifle. Maybe the shovel stock truly is the apex of ergonomics. Shadow Squid brought up a great point, that there is a fully developed R91 assault rifle model in Fallout 76, but it has yet to be made available in the game, or the Atom Store, or any other capacity. This makes me hopeful that it will be made available at some point, at least as a skin for an already existing rifle, but I would much prefer an actual, dedicated R91 rifle be included. Several of you, like Pignusman, let me know that the AK prefix doesn't always indicate Russian origin, since there are some Swedish weapons that also use the AK prefix, like the AK-5. I would be okay with a Swedish rifle in my Fallout. Brendan Boomauer mentioned that Gary 23 exploit that can allow you to keep all the Anchorage simulation objects, which he details in this comment thread if you are interested. Essentially, bring the Gary 23 body into the virtual reality lounger before you start. When you exit the simulation at the end, there is a split second when transitioning back to the Capital Wasteland, where you still have all the weapons from the simulation. And if you look down to Gary's body, you can access his inventory and transfer all the sim weapons onto him before the game takes them from you. Very clever. Rand Kriegsman brought up a good point that a terminal entry in the Museum of Freedom mentions the M199, which according to the terminal is a rifle still in service and well known in the military. It is chambered in 5.56mm, so some fans have surmised that the assault rifle from Fallout 4 might be the M199. This assumption is further strengthened by the presence of some Creation Club paints that have M199 written on the assault rifle's drum mag. I am glad that many of you are enjoying the remasters, and contrary to what some people have said, the effort to remaster is not a result of running out of material. I have several pages of ideas, both fully formed and works in progress, but my earliest videos were made before I had the know-how, equipment, confidence, and methodology that I do now, and it shows. The number of people that enjoy the remasters also confirms to me that it is not wasted effort. For my video about what a Fallout in Alaska would look like, I really liked the ideas and discussion that spawned. There was talk of things like king crab mirelurks, radioactive snow, a nightkin wearing the pelts of a polar bear and therefore looking like an abominable snowman. And I love these ideas. Some of you mentioned other potential DLC areas, like Russia, Kodiak Island, or Juneau, and there is a ton of potential with all those suggestions. Merritt mentioned some Cold War missile silos near Fairbanks that could make for a great locale, and that is a good note that did not come up in my research. And to top it all off, we have a boots-on-the-ground report from C, who is here to let us know that after living in Anchorage for a while, they are already on their way to a wasteland wonderland, having already seen ghouls and chem addicts there. That brings me to the end of the video. Click the links to join Discord or to support me personally on Patreon. Remember, you are all Adam's children, so go forth in his power. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next week.